Hi, welcome to the Diversity Report podcast with interviews with diverse change makers and movers and shakers. I'm your host, Deborah Levine, an award-winning author and editor-in-chief of the American Diversity Report. Joining me today is Mauricio Velasquez, the president and founder of the Diversity Training Group. Welcome, Mauricio, and thank you for joining the podcast.
Deborah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you. You have quite a resume, 25 years in the diversity field. Tell us how you got into this career path and why.
Sure. I am the firstborn, Mauricio Velasquez. I'm the firstborn of Irma and Tony Antonio Velasquez, immigrants, you have to say this today, legal immigrants from Colombia, South America. So I grew up outside of DC, seeing things, experiencing things that I'm sure most children, firstborn of immigrant families see. And then going to University of Virginia for my undergraduate, it's a pretty homogenous university in the mid-late 80s. And then going to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. for my MBA, where it's an explosion of global diversity, 200 plus countries in the classroom. I really was always curious about this field, always hungry, lots of questions about what I saw growing up. And so it was in my graduate program where I started to really focus on this field, worked in human resources in the public sector, the private sector, worked in the federal sector, in HR, and I said, it's time to venture out and do this on my own after some management consulting gigs, and started Diversity Training Group almost 21 years ago now. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Well, I've always felt a certain empathy with you. I too was brought up in Bermuda. I was born in America, but brought up in Bermuda. Came to America as a 7 or 8 year old and tried to accommodate the new culture, adapt and acculturate, and still trying.
Right.
Nothing stays the same. We have a different environment continually, and these days we certainly have our challenges as diversity professionals. You've written a beautiful article on the context for diversity today. Why don't you share with our viewers a little bit of what you had to say about diversity in this current climate?
Sure. I really started to see a sea change, a tidal shift last summer when Mr. Trump started running for president, and the things he said, incendiary and divisive, and it kind of set the tone. My work, my consulting firm, started to see an uptick in inquiries, but it really came to fruition after the election. We landed a half a dozen sexual harassment prevention clients. We landed some one-on-one executive coaching work. We're doing more audits, investigations, cultural assessments. I have 3 clients presently with hangman's noose, racist graffiti, and Confederate flag activity within the premises of the employers, the clients I work with. We have a dozen new diversity and inclusion training clients, strategy clients. We're seeing really an interesting uptick in inquiries around supervisory and management training. It turns out that most organizations in this country do not train their supervisors and managers to supervise and manage. They just kind of promote them and hope that they're, natural gifted supervisors. I'm doing a lot of supervisory and management training, adding a diversity and inclusion component to supervisory and management curriculum. And then lastly, I would say we're getting a lot of inquiries and doing a lot of training around basic fundamental civility and respect in the workplace, which is mind-boggling to me that we have to train people to be civil and respectful to each other. But then again, look at current events. I'm also doing specifically very poignant toxic workplace, toxic employee training. That's kind of the flip side of civility. So we're just seeing a lot of bad actors, a lot of bad behavior. It's not illegal to be a jerk in the workplace, but it is illegal to be a jerk to protected class. So I'm in the risk management business, and my clients are trying to manage their risk. And so that's what we're seeing. Businesses at an all-time high, activities at an all-time high, inquiries at an all-time high in my 25-year career. And I see no end in sight. Even looking at the Post today, the Washington Post, there's an article about widespread sexual harassment at Kay and Jared, the jewelers. Then you have, the conversations about the ban, and you have the hate crimes on the front page against Jewish cemeteries, the anti-Semite trend in this country, the anti-Muslim, so the anti-gender, the gender equity. It is just a plethora, an explosion of current public events that I think really enabling or emboldening certain elements of the workforce to kind of act out, to share their beliefs when in the past maybe they checked them at the door. And these beliefs and values and behaviors and comments are contra most policies and procedures, contra federal law, clearly not respectful, not appropriate, don't value diversity, aren't inclusive. So yeah, it's an explosion. I as much as I am sad to see current events and where they are, it's been an absolute bonanza for my firm.
I can imagine. I know in the Jewish community, we've seen more than 60 bomb threats to Jewish cultural centers across the country. Now 2 cemeteries have been defaced. And I know my friends who are at the local Jewish community center are looking very strongly at all kinds of security measures that they haven't had to do since we built that building almost 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, you and I talked about earlier, Deborah. I've received death threats. You've received death threats. Who knew when I started this firm 21 years ago that we would have to? I have a state-of-the-art alarm system in my home. So yeah, we're in uncharted waters. These are very, very precarious, unpredictable times. So it's unfortunate, but it's the context, it's the backdrop for all the work that you and I and other specialists, experts in the field are engaged in. There's no doubt. It's the context. It's what's happening. Every day I read the paper because I use it in class. This is fodder for my workshop.
Well, I know that you and I have talked in the past that this is nothing new, but it is much more visible, frequent, and empowered, apparently. I can remember running through some of these issues back in Oklahoma after the bombing of the Murrah building, but then it's subsided, and now we are having a surge, it appears, that isn't going away, and people like you are certainly needed more than ever. When you go out to a company that is experiencing some of these difficulties internally, what do you recommend that they do to change?
Yeah, well, one thing is first thing I point out is it's much smarter to be proactive than reactive. Don't wait till your front page news, a Fox News or now a Jared or a K Jewelers, or you be proactive. So what do you have in place? What's your diversity and inclusion infrastructure or risk management strategy, depending how you call it? First thing I look at is the organization's mission and core values. Do you have a mission, and do you have core values? Are they espoused? Are they explicit? And do people live and honor and respect these values? And usually one of those values is respect, or dignity and professionalism, or inclusion, or teamwork. But are we honoring and living those values? The high ground, the high road for me in working with my clients is let's make sure that we have at least a civil and respectful environment, respectful of all differences, welcoming, inclusive. Now, I have clients that don't have core values, and so the culture is kind of make it up as you go, and there's lots of room for bad actors. Then I have clients with core values that don't honor and live those core values. There are people blatantly violating those values, and there's no consequences. So we have to hold them accountable. The way we do this, diversity training group is hired to come in and collaborate. We partner with our clients, and we do some kind of an assessment, an audit, a cultural diagnosis, an organization. Sometimes it's organization-wide. Sometimes it's very specific to a moment of truth, a micro inequity, comments made, an incident, and where it might be just investigating a particular department or function. But we make sure that they have a set of core values and mission, and then they're honoring these values. And then we push that out through communication, through training, through coaching, through strategy work. Do they have a diversity inclusion plan and strategy? Does it support, is it anchored around their mission and values? I mean, this is kind of OD 101, but I think a lot of organizations have kind of either don't have a mission, or it's not articulated, don't have values, or they're not articulate. And so it's kind of a sense of anarchy. Then we roll out training, and it might be supervisory management training, it might be senior leadership, strategy work, but they have a plan in place, a strategy, and they're holding people accountable, and they have, they're really trying to create, that best workplace, that inclusive workplace, that workplace that's welcoming, because we're doing a lot of work in that intersection between inclusion, diversity, trust, respect, employee engagement. Because if you feel valued and respected, and you trust your organization, your employer, your manager, you're going to be more engaged in the work of the organization, the mission, and you're going to produce at a higher level. I mean, that's ultimately what we're all trying to work towards. So that's what we're doing. Now, it manifests itself in different ways. I mean, it might be coaching work. It might be specifically, I mean, even the uptick that I'm seeing in sexual harassment prevention work, gender equity work is odd. In that I'm called because I'm a guy, I'm a man, and they go, oh, we need a guy in here. And I always say, well, I have a lot of people on my team. Well, when my mentor, Linda Shevitz, taught me everything I know, does this work years ago, she was labeled a radical feminist. I do the exact same work, and people are like, wow, that was very thought-provoking. So we're doing a lot of work in a lot of sectors, from law enforcement to military to federal government to utilities. I mean, it's popping all over the place. And the common theme is an organization's not prepared. It doesn't have the infrastructure in place to battle, to be resilient contra some of the current event waves that keep hitting the workplace. And I will say, and another common denominator or a factor is social media. Social media is accelerating these issues, is putting it out there. It's the woman from Uber leaving and complaining. And now, Uber's under the microscope for being a sexually hostile workplace. And it was a blog, so, and Glassdoor, I mean, it's the World Wide Web is really facilitating, creating a transparent world, whereas in the past, you were given your hush money, you might settle and walk off in the sunset, and you can't tell anybody what's going on. That's why it was called hush money. Now that dynamic doesn't exist. So, from Fox News teaching us all a lesson, all the organizations, you don't want to be the next, Fox News, so to speak.
I understand. And with the growing use of social networks, I imagine that this is only going to get more intense as time goes on. And there are no...
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You see it with law enforcement. You see it. I mean, we get photos and video of things that in the past we had no idea was happening, in any sector. So it is a dynamic that I think holds organizations accountable. It holds them to a higher standard, because you can't be swept under the rug. You can't deny or look the other way or turn the other cheek. Those days are over. I say to my clients, don't worry about training and educating your people on these issues, these nuances, and seeing people resist the message. Worry more about not training your people, and nobody leaves. You want to create an environment where respectful, inclusive talented professionals want to stay, and the bigots, the haters say, you know what, this workplace is not where I want to stay. I don't feel welcome here. Let's make the horrible actors feel unwelcome in workplaces instead of quietly, tacitly, maybe unintentionally supporting them.
And these actors, they really have a very toxic effect on the workplace as a whole, don't they?
Yeah, it's a very good point. They're toxic. They're divisive. They're angry. They're upset. They're negative. And when we tacitly just kind of let them be, they perceive our inaction as agreement, which only emboldens them. I call it feeding the monster. And because of the recent election, more people feel emboldened to share their views and values that in the past maybe they kept to themselves, and now they're more provocative, they're more confident, they're more difficult, they're more negative, and they're bringing it to the workplace. I mean, in 2017, to say that I have 3 clients with hangman's nooses and racist graffiti and Confederate flag, I mean, that's really telling. And it's time to really recommit to the diversity and inclusion conversation.
Do you feel that the flip side to the empowered toxic people is that those who are not like that are intimidated into silence more frequently?
Yes, Deborah. We part of our work is dealing with bullying, and I'm doing a lot of work in the schools. I'm actually even speaking at a high school to high school students, which is some of my favorite work. And it's not the bully attacking or targeting; it's how everyone else behaves and responds to the bully, whether it's in the school classroom or it's in a workplace. And it appears that, like with Uber, there was some harassment, but the harassers were bullies and others were intimidated. That could be said of Fox News as well, it appears. Powerful people, right? The bad actors, and then everyone else kind of, looking the other way, turning the other cheek. So yes, diversity and inclusion work does include bullying. Yeah, our diversity and inclusion work is about helping the participants going through our training build a toolkit, problem solving, coaching, active listening, how to engage, how to lean in, how to not be silent. I mean, I think the silence is deafening with current events. I mean, how many people still are on the sidelines, not getting involved, not lamenting, not saying out loud, this is wrong. I don't know how severe, how acute, how incendiary things have to get before people go, you know what? This is just not right. I still don't think we're at the tipping point, but only time will tell.
Well, I would agree. At least I'm hoping that there will be a tipping point and people will cease to allow the intimidation factor to rule their response. And people like you who train others in problem solving and conflict management are needed, not only in the corporate world, but in the community, in the schools, as you say. And when you would give advice to these clients about things they really need to do, what are the top items that you want to see them undertake?
Well, make sure that when issues arise that they acknowledge and address them. I mean, I think that's the biggest problem is I'll get calls and there was an incident, there was something that happened and it's been months and months and months. And now they're finally getting around to it. You got to have a bias for action. You have to have policies and procedures in place. You have to have an diversity and inclusion strategy and plan. I did a session recently with Dominion Power, and they have a set of diversity ambassadors on the ground in each of their sites, holding people accountable, responsible, reminding people of their values. I think that's it, is be proactive, lean in, get in front of these issues. Don't wait till you're front page news, right? And then you're scrambling to say what you had in place. It's a risk management approach. It's It's a conversation. It's a checklist. Do you have a chief diversity officer? Do you have strategy, a plan, procedures in place? Have you trained your people, especially your supervisors and managers that are swimming in these diversity and inclusion related conflict? Have you trained them not to be aware, but to be skilled and competent to engage these issues? That's the key. Too many people talk about awareness. Hey, we're all more aware. You just got to read the paper. Are you skilled to engage in these conversations and resolve the conflict and solve the problems and build the relationships that build the trust? I mean, that's the key. There's a set of skills, there's tools, there's competencies that people don't even know they don't have. To promote supervisors and managers and leaders into their roles and not train them, it's an ambush. It's a setup in some respects.
It is, and certainly in these days where we're faced with issues that require either some experience, some knowledge, some mentoring, some help of some kind.
Yeah, and the diversity work can be done right and it can be done wrong. I do a fair amount of what I call rescue diversity work. You have to be inclusive, you have to be engaging, the tent's got to be big enough for everyone to fit under. You can't exclude, you can't leave anybody out. And you can't get up on your soapbox and get righteous and blame people for the wrongs of their forefathers. That's just not the way to do the work. But you can, again, the high ground is respect, civility, for all, for all customers, for all clients, for all internal and external customers. Anyone who challenges that is just not in step with their employer, right? They're just not in step with their employer.
Right. Well,
take the high ground. Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because so many times people tell folks like you and I, we're just too invested in political correctness, but that's not what we're about.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. Political correctness is such a beat up, vague term. There's a great difference between respectful and political correctness. And the people who use this political correctness drama or dynamic are basically saying, I'm not going to be respectful. I want to be, real. And if I offend you, that's your problem. Well, that's not how it works. The people who say, I'm about to say something god awful and horrific, but you can't get offended because I warned you, and I'm not politically correct. Then they say something awful, and then the place is like, oh my goodness, right? That's not how it works. Actions have consequences. I don't know your intent. What I know is what you said, and so this whole thing about, I want to be political, I don't care about political correctness or freedom of speech. Well, with freedom of speech comes freedom of consequence of that speech. So yeah, you can say whatever you want, but you then can't say afterwards, but you can't be offended. You can't tell other people how to feel. So, I didn't mean it is not an apology. I had no idea you were married too. It's not an apology. We forgot. This is why the work around civility and respect. I'm doing so much work around civility and respect. What happened? Did we all forget how to be civil to each other? Right? It is really, we live in interesting times, uncharted waters.
Well, that is for sure. And we need you. So tell us how we can get a hold of you.
Diversity Training Group. We're in our 21st year. DiversityDTG.com for the firm Diversity Training Group. Diversity, and then the letters, the acronym DTG.com. My office 703-478-9191. My direct mobile number, I'm transparent, 703-850-1145. I love what I do. There's a lot of work to be done out there. I was the first diversity trainer on the World Wide Web many, many moons ago, and we're still going strong 21 years into it.
Well, I'm looking forward.
Busier than we've ever been.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
sounds like you're going to be very busy this year. And I'm looking forward to checking in with you later, maybe in the summer or early fall, to see how this is working out, what trends you see then. And you can teach us all how to deal with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yo, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything you do, Deborah, as well.
Appreciate it. Talk to you soon. Take care. So thank you to Mauricio, and thanks to our audience. And tune in at the American Diversity Report and the many social networks where you will see this podcast. Thank you and goodbye.